is the snoring cat. She's having a dream. All is ass. What do I mean? The universe is bigger than any of us can really grasp. We don't know if it's finite or not. If it's not finite, there is no possible way of understanding a thing. If it is finite, it is nonetheless drastically bigger than us. More complicated than us, possibly. I don't know. Human consciousness is pretty complicated. Complex. I don't know which it is. It could be both. It is that which is. It is that which works. Else it wouldn't. But we don't understand why. We don't understand much of anything. It's often said the true wisdom comes from knowing that you know nothing. Richard Feynman would talk about there are known knowns, there are known unknowns. There are unknown knowns, and there are unknown unknowns. The unknown unknowns are potentially infinite. That's just category 4. All the rest. Occam's razor, typically stated to be the simplest explanation, tends to be the correct one, is more accurately described as a theory that requires the least number of assumptions will tend to be correct more often. The razor part of it is that you have a mass of idea, and only within this mass is a certain truth, and that you may pare away that which is not true and whittle down until you have only that which is true. Or, more likely, something where you have that which is true and you have some little crusty bits of untrue that are just inconvenient nooks to clean out, like say you're recovering a fossil. That's a good example. The picks, chisels, brushes to clear everything away so that only the fossil remains. That is like Occam's razor. Only the process of removing all of that excess represents making unnecessary assumptions about that which you do not conclusively know. Therefore, everything is fact-based, or it's not. And if it's not fact-based, you are making assumptions to cover for an absence of verifiable data. What this means is a proof or evidence or an example or a demonstration. The IEs and EGs and all that. In another term would be quod erat demonstrandum. QED, they say. If you have, someone says, well, such and such can't be done, or you can't do that, and then you do it. Quod erat demonstrandum. QED. I just did it. Well, no, you can't. Now you're denying reality. Get the fuck out of my face, right? That's how that goes. In a civil discussion, it's not like that. But what happens when a person is engaged in a rational civil debate if they were to refuse to accept an quod erat demonstrandum fact, which causes an assumption they had been making to no longer need to be made because the truth is known, and what they were pushing, the angle they were looking at, the line of reasoning they were using fails completely because that assumption they were making turned out to be wrong. Everything they had going from there is invalid. Delete. The razor has pared off untruth. That is Occam's razor. Not that you should just pick the least number of assumptions, because you can fabricate an elegant least number of assumptions that will turn out to be without a basis in reality. When people talk about something being based, that's what that actually refers to. Having a basis in fact and reality. Either something demonstrable or something that is academically, you can say, well, it does seem to work this way, though. But even there, don't go with that science says. The science is settled. Or, well, the scientists are experts and they say, never go for that, right? In the papers, they have sigma levels. What is sigma levels? Sigma levels are levels of confidence. And I'll tell you that unless, well, no, even it could be argued to minutiae if you wanted to, that nothing can be known 100%. So there's always a slight assumption. But generally speaking, if you have something that's been demonstrated, you don't have to make an assumption. You can consider that fact. As we are in a universe that is bigger than us, we cannot conceive nor contain the entirety of knowledge of the universe within us, because it would be to take that which is outward and store it in completeness, not as a model, not as some kind of fractalized assumption, anything that makes it so that the impossible can be stored possibly. Instead, we have a minor assumption we have to make. So the least number of assumptions. We assume that reality is real. We assume that the things that we can determine to be facts are facts. And we go from there. If you couch it with that, it means that 2 or 3 steps down the line, not 100 steps down the line. If your fundamental thing, let's say the standard model, turns out to not be right, it's not as devastating. Because you're like, well, 99.999 is not the same as 100. We will not be able to figure out teleportation, fold space, etc., without ourselves proceeding beyond the universe and all that exists. This is not meant to be a sensible statement. It is verbally there. But what we're talking about is some means of transcendental transubstantiation of consciousness to a level that exceeds and encompasses, or into a realm which encompasses, all that exists as far as we know it. The physical universe or whatever. But the physical universe is tied to everything that exists unphysically. If there are virtual processes or higher dimensions that contain our universe, then what we call all is just all that we may know. And even that, we can say, well, we know that there's more than that, known unknowns. But beyond what is thought is probably there, but we don't know, are the unknown unknowns. Unknown unknowns could be things like, okay, here's one that transitioned into a known unknown. Something we don't know for sure, but we know that we don't know it for sure. Simulation argument. As a potential nature of reality. Before the idea was presented or come up with by anyone, it was an unknown unknown. If nobody thought to think it. And then one day, somebody thought to think it, it became a known unknown. And it could be something that we know. It could be an unknown known. And we just don't realize it because that's the definition of an unknown known. But even the known knowns, we'll go back to my 5 steps. Step 1, know thyself. Step 2, to thyself be true. You lather, rinse, and repeat until you are self-aware and self-honest. Then, move on to wisdom. Step 3. I've been talking about it. Know that you know nothing. Okay, we're working on it. No knowns, known unknowns. Unknown knowns, unknown unknowns. Number 4. The guy who came up with that, no knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, unknown unknowns. Richard Feynman, the author of Step 4's quote, "If you think you know, then you probably don't." So, known knowns Well, okay, no, that was the fifth step. The fourth step is Einstein's quote. Any fool can know. The point is to understand. And what Feynman said, Feynman, the news is in my head. What Feynman said was that if you think you understand, then you probably don't. Course corrected. So, if we can't 100% know for sure anything on principle, we are therefore still making assumptions. This could all turn out to be something that is beyond a concept of that which is or is not. It could be superposition of is and is not, and possibly other states as well. It's possible that the dual hemisphered mind can only conceive of a possibility of a duality of two, right? Two things that are potentially true at the same time, though they do not appear to fit or match, like your wave-particle duality. Or it could be that such a thing is only a necessity of our cognitive function's ability to interpret stimuli and construct a worldview, which includes a world and how it works. This is what I'm saying, is that you cannot know for sure. It is possible that the physics that we determine in the universe and our ability to measure them experimentally, specifically in the academic, hypothetical, scientific method, developing a theory in the literal, definitive sense, not in the colloquial parlance of people, of just conversational, talking about, oh, I got a theory. If you're not an educated expert in a field, strictly adhering to the scientific process to develop an idea, this idea is not a theory. It's not even a hypothesis, because an educated guess means somebody who is in the field makes this guess and says, let's test it and see if it's right or not. So your supposition, your assumption, as a layperson, the best it can be is an assumption, maybe a presumption. This would mean that any attempt to know or understand is to make fundamental assumptions. Assumptions that your experimental process, your means by which you derive scientific principles of how things work with consistency, could itself be erroneous, false positive, and you're still running on it. You can make this assumption about anything and everything, because it is all contained within a universe that we do not understand fully or properly, without stepping above and beyond it to look at it externally, to view infinity from God's perspective until we reach that point, if we were ever to reach that point. Then we could know. And until then, from within, all is assumption. And what does assume do? It makes an ass out of you and me, and in this case, everybody else and everything else. All is ass.